Hello and welcome to episode 37 of the Teachers Tea Time podcast. My name is Mark and I hope you're doing well. We're proud to be a part of the Adjacent Collaborative. Learn more at adjacent.org. I have a mug of tea ready, so let's sit back, relax, and get on with the show. In today's story we hear more from Dr. Josh Wilson, specifically about what drove him to decide to take a PhD in education, and how for him that was a transformative experience. We met at a Christmas party that we have a mutual friend, our friend Gary, Christmas party. And you said to me, Mark, I'm doing a PhD. Right? We're married. I said, that's brilliant. And we started talking. So my question for you is, what made you think about doing a PhD? What was your PhD in, first of all, and then why did you decide to go and do it?
So my PhD is in educational policy planning and leadership. And at William & Mary, there's a variety of different concentrations that you go into, and mine's changed a few times because I've been there so long. So really what it is in curriculum leadership, K-12 curriculum leadership. So I did a PhD for a variety of reasons. First of all was, in college, I just could not wait to be done as an undergrad. I got to put a bow on this sucker. I did a fifth year, which one student of mine has called that a setback year, is what they refer to it as her college. I refer to it as the victory lap.
That's a good way to put it. One of my sons has done a victory lap year. It's doable.
Nothing wrong with the victory lap. But I had torn my MCL the previous, that fall, and as a Division III football player that's 5'11", runs like a 6'5" 40, probably going to be my last season playing competitive football. So I stayed an extra semester for that, and then as a student teacher at Luther, you pretty much do an extra semester. Although my wife always points out plenty of people didn't. So anyway, I did that, but I graduated with not a really good GPA. When I say not a really good GPA, it was above a 2.5, but pretty close. In fact, I was worried that they weren't going to give me my diploma until I actually got it in the mail.
Wow.
Yeah. So I just squeaked by. So I left, and I always knew that I could do better. I always knew that I could do better. But I didn't, certainly I had personal stuff coming up. My mother's health failing would weigh on me heavily, and I knew I could do a better job. And so I did my master's at ODU. I was thinking about this today. My first class was with Dr. Maura Hamitz, who is now the head of the history department at JMU. And I'm actually speaking with their class in February.
Oh, it's fantastic, isn't it? I mean, how things go around in circles like that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. She was really influential because my first class I had with her, I was taking as an audit or non-degree seeking student, I'm sorry, because I knew I wouldn't have gotten into any school with my GPA, and my GRE was fine, but they're going to look at your GPA and just think, holy cow, this guy cannot do this. And I remember we read our first book in that class was History 660, History of the Mediterranean. Her specialization is in Italian studies, and I think more specifically on Judaism within Italy and the Austrian Empire. So she's brilliant, right? Just a brilliant person. And we read this book, which I still have. And I recall writing a short reflection paper, and she held me after class. And I thought she was going to say, how did you get to this program? How did they let you in here? But no, she said, this was the best paper that I read for this class that was just turned in. And at that time I was trying to think, well, maybe I'll do education, maybe I'll do history. And she said, I would really encourage you to pursue history. And at York County and most schools, all you need is a master's in something related to the field. So I was a history teacher, sent an email about, does this count? I got something back saying, sure. So I went forward with it. Had a phenomenal experience. There's just not enough good things I can say about ODU. And you went there, and
that's right. Yeah.
It's great. It was profoundly influential that I was now being encouraged by professors and succeeding in graduate level coursework. Going to, as I moved through the program, I was going to conferences and, things to that effect. And it was awesome. So I finished it 2013. All good things have to come to an end. My thesis was in basically predominantly white churches in Norfolk responding to the to Brown versus Board of Education.
Mm.
There was a ton of resources on it, and it was based in Norfolk, Virginia. So
Yeah.
there was a gentleman that had a professor who had just passed away, who donated all of his archives. He was heavily influential in the Unitarian Universalist Church there, and I was just sifting through it and loved it. So it was wrapping up, and I wanted to do a history PhD. That was my plan, was to go into higher education. I got accepted into a few different schools, but they're all in the deep South because I really wanted to study. You gotta stick with me here, but post-Reconstruction Southern religious history.
Interesting.
Yeah, right. As somebody who's from Minnesota, although my paternal side of the family's from the South, I just thought it'd be really interesting. And then to think how they, in recent years, how the South grapples with these massive civic monuments to Confederate leaders that are just imbued with religious symbolism, and how we're reconciling with that, in the 21st century. I thought would have been just phenomenal. But we really loved York County, and I didn't want to leave. My wife didn't want to leave.
Absolutely.
To move to Mississippi or Louisiana or Texas. And I was really sad. I was really bummed out. I couldn't do it to my wife. And I remember though before that I had typed up a letter of resignation, because I was going to go off and pursue this. I think I was pretty committed that I was going to go to LSU, which had a guy, Professor, I think his name is Gaines Foster, and he wrote this really influential book about the topic. And I was going to study with him, and I was really excited. And but I had that resignation letter, and I remember being at the central office door at York County with it in my hand, and I couldn't open the door. And I thought, well, I need to be in education. This is, in somewhere teaching, somewhere, working with an actual like a K-12 school in some capacity, and I didn't know what that looked like. And I was pretty, I don't want to say, of course, clinically depressed or make light of that, but I was really down, because I thought, well, what's next? I really, I was just starting to become a student. I was just starting to learn how to learn, and so, moping around. We just bought a house in 2013. And so, when that was kind of like, well, I don't want to leave this. And we finally got this house in this great neighborhood, and we really love being here. But at any rate, in the spring or in the fall of 2014, I finally decided, well, I'm going to do a PhD. I want to do this. And it's going to be in education, because I'm a teacher, and I want to influence positively schools and communities. And so I was really torn between VCU and William and Mary. Mm-hmm. I went up to VCU, and I met with Dr. Gabriel Rich, and it was just supposed to be like hey, what's the school about? Yada, yada, yada. I was there for 2 hours, just sitting there talking about future projects and research. And afterwards, he's like, you want to go get some coffee? And I was like, heck yes, I want to go get some coffee. Let's go do it. Coffee shop was closed, and I had to go home at some point. And then I went to William and Mary, and I met with Dr. Leslie Grant, who was to be my advisor. And what ultimately drew me to William and Mary was the school was, it's a well-regarded institution. Was closer, was a big part of it. I mean, driving up to Richmond from York County for class would have been tough. And then also my mom always wanted to go to William and Mary.
Oh, fair enough. And
they had lived in Virginia when my grandfather was stationed in the military, but she could never go there. And so it was kind of like, this is a way to honor my mom. So that's why I chose it. I went there not knowing specifically what I wanted to pursue. Besides just thinking, like, I miss being in school.
Yeah.
I miss learning and researching, and it's not even about the people will say, what's about the the interaction with other students. It wasn't even that. I mean, PhD work, as you know, gets so solitary and isolated, but it was about the conversations that we're having on campus, on the discussions, and just being able to like be in the research and know that you're working on something that could potentially impact people in schools in a positive light. And the thing that really kept me there is my first class was about Dr. Grant. If you're listening to this, I'm really sorry, but the first class was something that I thought I was going to find just super boring.
Yeah.
Strategic planning.
Oh gosh, yeah, it's super boring.
But I found it to be pretty cool. You know, one of the things that she asked us to do was to meet with school board members, and I did. I met with one of my students whose mom was on the school board, and she came to my house, and we had a great conversation. I met the superintendent of York County and had a great conversation. He was just starting there, so he invited me to go to like planning committees at the school, and you know, what do you want the school to look like, and that kind of stuff. And it was really, I thought it'd be really interesting. And, you know, going back to what I wanted to study as an undergrad with pre-med, minus the actual medicine, you know, the blood and gore that comes with it. What I really wanted to do is I wanted to help people.
Yeah.
And that's really what teaching is. It's helping people. And I saw myself doing that. And then as I kind of worked through the courses, the thing at William & Mary was there's, you take a variety of classes and a variety of topics. And what kept me there was Dr. Grant that first spring, and then meeting Dr. Gary's, who's, I mean, you've met him, of course, dissertation chair. I mean, just the guy is, I mean, just was like, you sitting there listening to him talk, and like, you know, your mind is exploding because the guy is just brilliant. Always write notes. Even, I mean, throughout my dissertation, I would get almost mad. And I know this sounds bad, Dr. Gary's, if you're listening, I'm sorry, but I'd almost get mad because he would pose a response, and it was something that I never thought about. And it was like, son of a biscuit. I never thought about this. Now I got to reframe my whole way of thinking. And
so that brings me to a good question. For those who haven't actually gone and done like PhD type work and classes, what does it do to you as a teacher?
Oh, that's a great question. That is a great question. So I think studying history as a master's student made me better at content, which I'm grateful for. Don't get me wrong. I'm extremely grateful for it. But studying a PhD, and it's different than an EDD. You know, the EDD I always say is the practitioner's one, and not that I didn't want to do that, but my thought was always I wanted to go into higher education. Okay. And now, of course, since I finished a PhD, I don't know. That's certainly something on the table, but I think I'd be just as happy in a school, being an administrator or whatever it might be. But my point being is that being a PhD student in education forced me to not just think about content as like, I know all this stuff. Here's some other facts and figures and numbers and whatnot. And that all is really important. I don't want to diminish that. But doing this PhD, it reframed my whole view on what education is as a concept, you know, as a system, from top to bottom. Like, what do we want kids to know when they leave? What do we want them to know, you know, when they go out into, they graduate? You know, as we move forward, what types of experiences do we want them to have? What types of learning environments do we want them to have? And it becomes much more of a philosophical approach to the whole concept of learning and education, as a means of social progress, you know,
absolutely,
as a means of developing humanity. I know, you know, and I say that, and I know it sounds so like, what's the word I'm looking for? Audacious, isn't it? But so like there's these pie in the sky dreams. But I think that's what teachers are, right? We believe that they have this fundamental belief that things will get better, and that people get better, and that there's goodness in everybody. And if you didn't believe that, then, you know, what are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, really, and I know it's something similar to you. You know, I was a reluctant student all my life, and I was a reluctant teacher. So I never really wrestled with what my purposes were for education. And why do we do this? Why do we do public ed the way we do public ed?
Yeah.
And those sort of big questions hit me really hard when I was starting my coursework.
Yeah.
And you know, really made me recognize the power of purpose, you know, in knowing what I do and why I want to do it and defining that. And that's, you know, for me, it was transformative.
For sure. Even this first class with Dr. Grant, you know, we're talking about like how systems interact with each other. And I had never really thought of it that way. You know, I always thought of, well, here's my history class. Boom. Kids take another one. Done. Next one. But I never thought about, you know, we can restructure education in such a way that promotes, you know, a different way of thinking, a different way of living. And, you know, I look back on some of those classes. Of course, I saved everything because I'm kind of a pack rat with that, as most teachers are. You know,
yeah, we all do. Yeah.
And every so often I look back on that, and it's just interesting to kind of trace your trajectory of thought. That my first semesters I really struggled with, but when I was a history student, you know, it's got to be this, and it's got to be this fact, and it's got to be this point, and this is where you get that from. And not that you don't do that in educational research, but what I really appreciate as I moved forward is you can start to think, well, these are some big issues, like curriculum defining, school defining, state defining issues that we need to have pretty honest conversations about. You know, I think a lot of education, especially now, it's all worst case scenario. You know, what if the budget get cut? What if the referendum fails? You know, what if all this happens? But you know, I think this PhD coursework really got me thinking about, okay, so if we flip that and think about, well, what can we potentially do? Then we start thinking of things a bit optimistically. And not to say that realism or pragmatism should just kind of go out the window, but like you said, it's just transformative. It's a totally different way of thinking.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the key thing is, you know, once I really got to learn a lot more about sort of the purpose of public education and the visions that people had for public ed in the 1880s and 1890s, going to John Dewey and that. And the more I realized we've not got anywhere even close to realizing that vision, nowhere near. And for me, it's a shame, you know, it is a shame. But then that drives me to wanting to do good work, you know, rather than just do work. And then I feel bad about some of the work I did when I was in the early years of my career, because I wasn't doing good work. I was just doing work. And then I feel guilty about it. It's
so funny you say that, Mark, because one of the things that I'm going to talk with Dr. Hammett's class about is this paper that I wrote when I was working with Dr. Stoddard, who's now at UW-Madison.
Mm-hmm.
It was looking at this whole trajectory of education, social studies education, and it just is. It's just interesting the trajectory that it has gone on for the past 100 years about how it's all seems to be reactive. You know, we had to change education when the Soviets started launching stuff up into space, and it's just a really fascinating to think about. There's something else I wanted to say, but now I forgot. Oh, right. So speaking of that, so I took the class with Dr. Grant, and the first grad class was spring of 2015 at William & Mary. So that summer you had to take research methods. It was called F65, and it was like intro to research.
Okay.
Rather. And it was for all like master's, graduate students, I think. I'm not quite sure who else in there, but I walk in there, my very first class that summer semester, I'm with a friend of mine, Stephen Mead, his wife Kate, who was working on her master's and as a reading specialist.
I've shared a beer with Stephen. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. He's a heck of a guy. I was actually going to talk to him tonight, but
oh, cool.
See what happens. So, you know, I walked in there, and there is a student that I had my very first year at
Wow,
who was getting her master's to be a teacher. She's brilliant. I mean, I think she had a full ride there to teach science, and it was one of those scholarships where you got it all paid for, your master's, provided that you taught at a Title I school for X amount.
Okay.
So she was great. And I remember I'm sitting there, and I knew who she was immediately. She saw me and she said, "Hi, Mr. Wilson." And I said, "Hello." And we're talking a little bit. And I wanted to say to her, I am so sorry for
Yeah.
who I was as a teacher. I didn't know who I was as a person. And I'm just trying to teach you this stuff. And it's different now. You should come back.
Yeah. Come to my class now. We'll do it so much better. Yeah.
Exactly. And it was just I'd never had such an experience. Pretty cool.
It's amazing. And so it's kind of driven me a little bit when I work with my pre-service teachers, so don't just settle for doing what everyone's telling you to do and what the system tells you to do. Now that's work. The good work is where you meet students' needs and you make that difference and do what's right for the community. And if you're not driven to do that, or I want to be blunt sometimes, say just don't enter the profession, because you can be cool. And I feel bad because I think sometimes we cause more harm than good. Sometimes,
I had a professor at William & Mary, and I don't recall who it was, probably Dr. Gary's. But he said, there's certain things that we know work and don't work and all that kind of stuff in education. But, people practice law, they practice medicine with this assumption that we're going to keep fixing things. Things change, they evolve, and we've got to keep trying. You practice education. And I never had thought about it that way. And I told my student teachers, you are going to fail. Something is going to go poorly, whether you're a student teacher, whether it's, I put all this effort into this new lesson, kids don't like it. Well, revise it, try something different. And we keep doing the same thing over and over and over again and expect the same results, despite the fact that, people, and I don't want to say kids change. They don't change, but the issues they face change.
Like me, Josh was a reluctant educator who, when he did his PhD, was transformed by what he went through in that journey. So in our next episode, we're going to learn about what he chose to study and why it's so important. But until then, that was episode 37 of the Teachers Tea Time podcast. This podcast is a proud member of Adjacent. If you're looking for community, coaching, or content based around your needs, point your browser to www.adjacent.org and become a member for less than the cost of a caramel macchiato a week. So go ahead and navigate to www.edjacent.org and choose Become a Member. It's the stories of teachers, students, and school communities that matter most in education. So, to make them visible, we need your help. Please leave positive reviews wherever you are able. Leaving a good review can really help our visibility. Also, please don't keep this podcast to yourself. Tell your friends to subscribe and listen too. One thing we all have in common is that we've been to school. Everyone has an educational story to share. So if you'd like to contribute to the pod in any way, if you have a story to share, long, short, tragic, or comic, if you have comments to make about the podcast or just want to say hi, you can send an email to teachersteatimepod@gmail.com. Or alternatively, you can send emails to me directly using mark@adjacent.org. I love to read what you have to say. If social media is your thing, you can follow me on Twitter @MarkDearcop. You can find our contact information, copies of the show notes, and you can download previous episodes of the podcast at www.teachersteatimepod.com. The podcast artwork was created by Phaedra. Opening and closing music is by Bryan Boyko. It's been my pleasure to be your host today. Thank you for listening.